Chicago Cubs fans, we have so much to catch up on after a busy weekend for the Chicago Cubs where they dropped 2 of 3 against the Seattle Mariners. We got to talk about and cover all of that. However, we also got to talk about how the Cubs are desperately missing Dansby Swanson. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Chicago Cubs Central, your number one spot for all things Chicago Cubs. Listen, I'm your host, Mike Jones. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Make sure that you guys like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode of Chicago Cubs Central right here on the network, whether that be on YouTube, whether that be on Spotify, whether that be on Apple. Thank you all so much for tuning in, man. Make sure you guys comment below your thoughts on today's topics. Now, with that being said, the Chicago Cubs do go ahead and salvage the series. So we got to fly to W. They salvaged the series by blowing out the Seattle Mariners on Sunday, hitting 2 grand slams in this game, one by Ian Happ, one by Pedro Ramirez. However, the Chicago Cubs should have won this series. Make no mistake about it. The Chicago Cubs should have won this series. And honestly, this series, as many of the later season series begin to do, have us evaluating the Chicago Cubs team and seeing where their shortcomings are, pitching being one of them still, which is hilarious because we traded for so many pitchers. We traded for 3 pitchers in this series. I'm sorry, we traded for so many pitchers, 3 of them to be exact, in this last trade deadline. However, Zephyr John has not panned out. Like I said, you've also had clunkers from our other 2 starting pitchers, but you've also had very good starts from them also at the same time. So that being Kevin Gausman, and that also being I forget the other one's name. My mind is blanking on it right now. But again, the Chicago Cubs are desperately missing a big, huge piece of the team, and this is kind of the main point focus we want to talk about today. So I want you guys to hear me out. Also want you guys to comment your thoughts below after you hear out what I have to say. So you might look at the Cubs' recent defensive problems and say this team has struggled defensively, but statistically that isn't actually really true. As recent as August 11th, the Cubs had committed only 18 errors, the fewest in Major League Baseball, and their 990 fielding percentage was tied for the best in baseball. You see, this is all important because the Cubs built one of the best defenses in baseball around the middle of the diamond. Dansby Swanson at shortstop, Nico Hoerner at second base. And obviously you have Pedro Armstrong patrolling center field and being able to veer out to left center and right center and make those catches and help Ian Happ as well as Seiya Suzuki or Michael Conforto. The defense has been a huge part of what made this Cubs team competitive. So losing Dansby isn't about replacing a terrible defender. It's about taking one of the team's defensive strengths and asking another player to play a position that he has not played in so long. I mean, guys, you got to think about it. You got to remember, Nico Hoerner was originally a shortstop. The Cubs moved him over to second base because they had Dansby Swanson. So at this time, like I said, it's just tough for him right now, and it looks like it's tough for the Chicago Cubs. And there's a couple of reasons why the Cubs miss Dansby Swanson. So let's be honest. Dansby offense has not been great this year. At the time of his injury, Swanson was hitting a .216 batting average. He had 18 home runs, 66 RBIs, and a .704 OPS. Those aren't superstar offensive numbers, to say the least. In fact, the .216 average is a career low. But here's where the argument changes for Dansby. Dansby doesn't have to be a superstar hitter to be incredibly valuable to the Chicago Cubs. Guys, Dansby Swanson glove is what matters the most. Swanson entered the injury with a .987 fielding percentage and only 6 errors. And this isn't some new development. Since coming to Chicago, Swanson has established himself as one of the better defensive shortstops in all of baseball. He won the 2023 Fielding Bible Award at shortstop, leading the position with 18 defensive runs saved. So when we lose that guy in August, you're not simply replacing a .216 hitter. You're changing the defensive identity of your team. So let's look at Nico real quick at the shortstop position. And this is where things get interesting. So Nico is going to move from second base to shortstop. And let's be clear, Nico can play shortstop. In fact, that's where he started. He's not some disaster out there. In 2026, Hoerner has appeared in 20 games at the shortstop position, starting 14 of them with 146 innings, 1 error, and a 981 fielding percentage at that position. Guys, let me tell you something. That's very respectable numbers coming from Nico. You're taking a guy who's been an excellent second baseman and moving him to shortstop because of an injury. And now you have to ask, are the Cubs getting the best version of Nico at shortstop? Offensively, Nico is hitting 263, 7 home runs, 58 RBIs, 21 stolen bases, and a 683 OPS through August 23rd. Now, that's a useful offensive season for him. But Nico's biggest value has always been his ability to get on base, make contact, run the bases, and play excellent defense at second baseman. So moving him over to shortstop changes that equation. Now let's look at Pedro Ramirez, who's been getting the bulk of the time at second base. So this is where Cubs fans have a legitimate reason to actually be excited. So Pedro has been impressive offensively. Through August 23rd, he's hitting a 285 batting average, a 343 OBP, 667 OPS. He has 3 home runs, 20 RBIs, and for 7 stolen bases in his rookie season. And he's been particularly good as of recently. Over his last 30 games, Pedro has slashed 305, 330, 377, and 442 with 2 home runs, 13 RBIs, and 5 stolen bases. Guys, that's real production coming from Pedro Ramirez. But see, here's the catch. Pedro's defense at second base has not matched what Nico gives you. He's played 31 games and 69.1 innings at second base with 2 errors and a 978 fielding percentage. Pedro is only 22 years old. So, guys, remember, he's learning. He's developing. He's absolutely capable of becoming a good defensive player. But right now, he ain't Nico Hoerner, and Nico Hoerner ain't Dansby Swanson. So the domino effect of his injury is having a huge effect on the Chicago Cubs. The biggest point I want to make you guys understand is this. It's not Dansby out, Nico in. It's Dansby out, Nico moves to short, Pedro takes over second. The entire middle infield changes. And we saw it this past weekend against the Mariners. I feel like it's been forever since the Chicago Cubs have gotten a double play. I just feel like they just haven't been able to capture that and do that. Now, maybe when Matt Shaw comes back, because he's apparently close to being ready to come back, maybe he picks up some of the slack and gets some shots at second base, and Pedro can either DH or give Alex Bregman a break at third base. But your team is built around pitching and defense. So, guys, this matters. The Cubs have acquired pitchers who benefit from having a strong defense behind them. Losing the stability of Dansby Swanson and Hoerner playing their natural positions creates a different environment for the pitchers. And we've already seen a glimpse of the adjustment. On August 22nd against Seattle, Nico Hoerner committed a throwing error at shortstop that helped lead to an unearned run. One play doesn't prove Nico can't play shortstop. It doesn't. But it does illustrate the point. Guys, shortstop is different. The angles are different. The throws are different. The positioning is different. The responsibilities are different. And you're asking Nico to do it during the most important part of the season. So I know a lot of people had a lot to say about Dansby Swanson all season long and how they wanted him gone. They wanted him traded. They were tired of him. They hated the fact that he was basically an automatic out and everything like that. But now you're starting to see Dansby's reasoning or the value Dansby brings to this team. So here's my argument. I'm not saying the Cubs need Dansby Swanson back because he's hitting 300. He's not. I'm saying they need him back because he gives them something that's extremely difficult to replace. Stability. When Dansby returns, you can put him back at shortstop. You can move Nico back to second, and suddenly you have your preferred defensive alignment. And on top of that, you can stop having Michael Conforto DH and put Pedro Ramirez either at the DH position, or you can put Pedro Ramirez at third base. That's 2 positions stabilized with just 1 return, and then a third player being able to be used in different spots. The Cubs enter this stretch as one of baseball's best defensive teams. You don't want to mess with something like that that's working. So what do you do about Dansby's offense? Well, now here's the counter argument. Some Cubs fans are going to say, why are we acting like Dansby is irreplaceable when he's hitting 216? And guys, that is fair. That's a debate. Because Pedro is hitting 285 and Nico is hitting 263 and Dansby is hitting 216. If you only look at batting averages, you can make a legitimate argument that the Cubs might actually improve offensively with Nico and Pedro. But baseball isn't played on a spreadsheet with just one statistic. He's already hit 18 home runs and driven in 66 runs, this being Dansby, this season, despite the low batting average. So the Cubs don't need Dansby to suddenly become a 300 hitter. They need him to be healthy enough to give his defense power and veteran presence. So Dansby is supposed to be turned back in September, and that's why the Cubs timeline is so important. If Dansby follows the optimistic 4-week recovery, we're talking about approximately September 14th, him being back in the lineup for the Chicago Cubs. If it takes the full 6 weeks, we're talking about September 28th. The regular season ends September 29th. So there's virtually no margin for error, no setbacks or anything like that the Cubs could stand to have. The Cubs need Dansby to progress. They need him healthy. They left him in Chicago during their West Coast trip, their final West Coast trip of the season. And they need him to play meaningful baseball immediately. So it's looking like the Cubs are probably going to end up playing in the wild card. Hopefully, you hope they'll be able to host a wild card spot. So with the Chicago Cubs hosting a wild card spot, what does that mean? That means you're going to need Dansby Swanson's defense. You guys remember in 2025, Dansby Swanson and what he did to the San Diego Padres, how he literally single-handedly caused the Padres to lose the final game, the deciding game of that series. Can you imagine how monumental a change it would be if Dansby ain't ready to go by the time the wild card series gets started? Guys, we are desperately missing Dansby Swanson, and I hope to God he can get healthy so that he could be ready to go for the Chicago Cubs. We'll just have to see what happens with that. Also, we got to make sure we fly the W over here because the Chicago Cubs did pick up a victory against none other than those Seattle Mariners, salvaging the series. So great job for that. Like I said, it was a blowout win. The Chicago Cubs now take their talents to Arizona. They got 8:40 start times going for 2 days. And they're going to be going up against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Like I said, and this is another series where they're playing a team that has been scuffling as of late, but Arizona does still have a winning record. They're 69-62 on the season, and they are fighting for a wild card position right now. So we got Kevin Gausman going for the Chicago Cubs on Monday. And he's going to see Merrill Kelly, who's 8-11 with a 5.37 ERA. So the Chicago Cubs absolutely need to beat up on him and take advantage of that. Then there is Clay Holmes. That was the guy I was thinking about. Clay Holmes is 5-6 with a 2.49 ERA. He's going, and then there for the Arizona Diamondbacks, they got Brandon Fad going. He's 7-1 with a 3.39 ERA. Only lost one game so far this season for the Diamondbacks. That'll be a toughie. And then, of course, there's Matthew Boyd going on Wednesday for the Cubs and Diamondbacks. This is 2:40 start time on that game. Eduardo Rodriguez is going to pitch for the Diamondbacks, and he is 13-4 with a 2.61 ERA. Meanwhile, Matthew Boyd, whose ERA has ballooned up to 4.15 after his last start, it was 8-2 on the season. That's going to be a very, very interesting game to watch. So listen, man, the Chicago Cubs did pick up a game on the Milwaukee Brewers. They did lose to the Atlanta Braves 4-2. So like I said, the Cubs are now 6 games back of the Brewers. The Brewers have 81 wins and 50 losses though on the season, leading the MLB right now. They're the first to 80 wins. I just don't know how they do it with this damn Brewer magic, man. It's stupid. It makes no sense. But the Chicago Cubs still got a fighting chance. They still got a dog in the fight. They got to keep playing. We'll see what happens. But listen, man, that's the episode for tonight. I appreciate you guys so much. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss any content right here on Chicago Cubs Central, your #1 spot for all things Chicago Cubs. Go Cubs, go. Peace.
Thank you for watching another episode of Chicago Cubs Central, the #1 spot for all Chicago Cubs content. Remember to like, share, subscribe for more Cubs content.